The morning sun cut through the humid Georgia air as Second Lieutenant Maya Chen adjusted her ACU jacket for the third time. The fabric felt stiff, too new, the creases still sharp from the package. She stood at the edge of the Fort Benning training field, watching 83 other newly commissioned officers mill around in nervous clusters, their conversations punctuated by uncertain laughter and the careful distance of strangers assessing one another. Maya had been awake since 0400, her body still running on West Point time, even though graduation felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. She'd triple-checked her gear, memorized the training schedule, and arrived 30 minutes early, habits ground into her bones over 4 years of discipline and structure. Now, watching the sun climb higher, she felt the familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with something else, something sharper. She was one of 11 women in this particular officer basic course cohort. She'd counted. She always counted. "Hey, check out the fresh lieutenant," a voice said behind her, just loud enough to be heard, but not quite loud enough to be confrontational. "Looks like she's about to cry." Maya didn't turn. She'd learned at the academy that the first response set the tone for everything that followed. She kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, her face neutral. But her jaw tightened just slightly, a tension she couldn't quite suppress. "Give her a break, Morrison," another voice said, this one more conciliatory. "We're all new here." "Yeah, but some of us actually look like we belong." The comment hung in the air like cordite after a shot. Maya felt it land, felt the familiar weight of it settle across her shoulders. She'd carried that weight for 4 years at West Point, and apparently she'd be carrying it here too. She took a slow breath through her nose, held it for a 4 count, and released it slowly. An old technique her father had taught her when she was 7 years old and crying about kids at school who said her eyes were too different, her name too foreign sounding, her lunch too weird. "You're an oak tree," he'd told her, his calloused hand gentle on her small shoulder. "Oak trees don't bend for every wind that blows." The memory steadied her. She rolled her shoulders once, adjusting the weight of her pack, and continued watching the field. The training cadre arrived at exactly 600, their approach marked by the crisp synchronization of their boots on the concrete. Master Sergeant Rodriguez led them, a stocky man with iron-gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and weather. He'd been doing this for 23 years, according to the brief bio they'd all received, and it showed in the way he moved. Economical, purposeful, without a single wasted motion. "Listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the morning chatter like a blade through silk. The field fell silent instantly. "Welcome to Officer Basic Course, 4th Cycle, 2024. For the next 12 weeks, we will transform you from college graduates with shiny new bars into actual officers. Some of you will thrive. Some of you will struggle. And some of you—" He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled group with the weight of absolute certainty, "will discover that you do not belong here." Maya felt the words like a physical presence. She'd heard variations of this speech before. At West Point, during summer training, during every challenging evolution of her military education. The message was always the same. Prove yourself or fail. She'd spent 4 years proving herself. She could do it for 12 more weeks. "You will address me as Master Sergeant," Rodriguez continued. "Your primary instructor for small unit tactics will be Captain Williams. Your land navigation instructor is Staff Sergeant Chen. No relation to any of you, so don't bother asking. Your combat lifesaver course will be taught by Sergeant First Class Martinez. Are there any questions?" Silence. Outstanding. First evolution begins in 30 minutes. Formation runs, followed by classroom instruction on leadership principles, followed by initial equipment issue. Fall out and prepare. The group dispersed, conversations resuming in lower, more cautious tones. Maya moved toward the designated assembly area, hyper-aware of the eyes tracking her movement. She'd felt this before, too. The assessment, the judgment, the quiet calculations people made about whether she was competent or just a diversity checkbox. "Lieutenant Chen?" She turned to find a tall, gangly officer with red hair and a face full of freckles approaching her. He had an open expression, earnest in a way that reminded her of her younger brother. His name tape read Sullivan. "Sullivan," she said, acknowledging him with a slight nod. "Just wanted to say hey. Looks like we're in the same platoon for training." He offered a hand, and she shook it. His grip was firm without being aggressive, professional without being cold. "Where'd you commission from?" "West Point." His eyebrows rose slightly. "No kidding. That's impressive. I came through ROTC at Penn State." He glanced around, lowering his voice slightly. "Listen, don't let Morrison get to you. Guy's been running his mouth since we arrived yesterday. Pretty sure he's overcompensating for something." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "Noted. Thanks." "Besides," Sullivan continued, his own smile widening, "anyone who makes it through the academy is tough as nails. I had a friend who went there. She said it was basically 4 years of voluntarily chosen suffering." That's surprisingly accurate. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the other officers prepare for the formation run. Maya found herself relaxing slightly, the tightness in her shoulders easing just a fraction. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she'd find her people here, the way she'd eventually found them at Westbound. Point, other officers who cared more about competence than appearance, who judged based on actions rather than assumptions. "Formation," Master Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cracked across the field like thunder. "Move." The next 90 minutes were a blur of movement and pain. The formation run stretched for 5 miles through the Georgia pine forests, the humidity wrapping around them like a wet blanket even at this early hour. Maya found her rhythm quickly. She'd always been a strong runner, her slight frame well suited to endurance over power. She settled into the middle of the pack, her breathing steady, her form efficient. Morrison ran near the front, his longer legs eating up the ground with what looked like ease, but what Maya suspected was actually maximal effort masked by pride. She'd seen that before, too, people pushing too hard too early, burning themselves out to make a statement rather than pacing for the long haul. By mile 3, Morrison had dropped back. By mile 4, he was sucking wind behind her. Maya didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just kept running, her eyes forward, her breathing controlled. Oak trees don't bend. The classroom instruction that followed was standard material. Leadership principles she'd studied extensively at West Point, with a few Army-specific applications thrown in. Captain Williams was a sharp-featured woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense delivery. Maya found herself taking notes, not because the material was new, but because writing helped her process and retain information. Old habit from years of academic rigor. "Leadership," Captain Williams said, her marker squeaking across the whiteboard, "is not about authority. It's not about rank. It's about the moment when everything goes to hell and your soldiers look to you for guidance. That's when you discover what kind of officer you actually are." Maya wrote that down, underlining it twice. Equipment issue came after lunch. a utilitarian meal of bland chicken, rice, and vegetables consumed quickly in the dining facility. They were issued everything from rucksacks to night vision goggles, each item requiring a signature, an inventory number, and a stern warning about accountability. "You lose this gear, you pay for it," the supply sergeant informed them, his tone suggesting he'd heard every excuse imaginable and believed none of them. "Uncle Sam doesn't like replacing expensive equipment because you were careless." Maya signed for her items methodically, checking serial numbers, examining condition, storing everything in the designated locations in her ruck. Organization was its own form of discipline, and discipline was what separated good officers from dead ones. She was kneeling on the ground, arranging her issued items according to packing lists when she heard the voices again. "Can't believe they let someone that small into the infantry," Morrison said. He wasn't even trying to be quiet now. "What's she gonna do in actual combat?" asked Gore. "The enemy to please lift lighter weights?" "Dude, shut up," Sullivan said, his previously friendly voice gone hard. "She just smoked you on that run." "That was a conditioning run, not combat. Different thing entirely." "Yeah? And which one did you do at the academy for 4 years?" Maya kept packing, her movements precise and controlled. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't flush. She was an oak tree, and oak trees didn't bend. But inside, in the place she kept carefully locked away, something burned. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More patient. Prove yourself or fail. She'd heard it her entire life, from teachers who looked surprised when she aced their tests, from coaches who seemed shocked when she outperformed their expectations, from the boys at West Point who'd assumed she'd wash out during Beast Barracks, during field training, during any of the dozens of evolutions designed to break the weak and forge the strong. She hadn't broken then. She wouldn't break now. The afternoon brought land navigation training, compass work, map reading, terrain association. Staff Sergeant Chen, no relation as promised, was a compact man with quick hands and a teaching style that emphasized precision over speed. "You can be fast when you're good," he told them, his pointer tapping the laminated map spread across the table. "First you need to be good. Fast comes later. Good keeps you alive." Maya absorbed the instruction like a sponge, her mind cataloging techniques and adjustments. She'd done plenty of land nav at West Point, but the Georgia terrain was different from New York, more forested, more humid, with different vegetation patterns and topographical features. She asked questions when clarification would improve understanding, stayed silent when she had nothing meaningful to contribute. By the time they broke for dinner, her brain felt saturated with information, her body pleasantly tired from the physical exertion. This was familiar territory, the push and pull of military training, the constant demand for more, better, faster. She'd thrived in this environment before. She could thrive in it again. Chen. She looked up from her dinner tray to find Captain Williams standing beside her table. Maya started to rise, but Williams waved her back down. "As you were, Lieutenant." Williams pulled out a chair and sat, her own tray holding an identical meal. "I wanted to check in. First day can be overwhelming." "I'm good, ma'am. Thank you." Williams studied her for a moment, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "West Point, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Class of 2024. "How was it?" Maya considered the question, weighing honesty against protocol. "Challenging, ma'am, but valuable." Diplomatic answer. Williams smiled slightly. "I went through ROTC myself, so I can't speak to the academy experience directly, but I've served with plenty of West Pointers. They all say it's simultaneously the best and worst thing they ever did." "That's accurate, ma'am." Williams took a bite of her chicken, chewed thoughtfully, swallowed. "I heard some chatter during the run today. You handle it well." Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Ma'am?" The comments, the assumptions, the garbage that some people spew when they're intimidated by competence they didn't expect. Williams's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical almost. "You kept your bearing, maintained your performance, didn't let it affect your execution. That's professional." "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me, just keep doing it." Williams leaned back slightly, her expression turning more serious. "I'm going to be straight with you, Chen. You're going to face more of that here. Some of it will be direct, some of it will be subtle. Some of these officers have never served with women in their previous units. Some of them have preconceived notions about who belongs in combat arms. Your job is not to educate them or change their minds. Your job is to be so goddamn competent that their opinions become irrelevant." Maya felt something shift in her chest. A recognition. A validation. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Williams stood, picking up her tray. "Also, for what it's worth, I looked at your academy records. Top 15% of your class, distinguished graduate in military science, high marks in tactics and leadership. You earned your spot here. Don't let anyone make you forget that." She walked away before Maya could respond, leaving her sitting alone at the table with her half-eaten meal, and a warmth spreading through her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of instruction, practical exercises, and physical challenges. Maya threw herself into the training with the same intensity she'd brought to West Point. First to arrive, last to leave, meticulous in her preparation and execution. She excelled at land navigation, her natural sense of direction combining with rigorous practice to make her one of the top performers in the course. She held her own during the ruck marches, her smaller frame actually advantageous for the long-distance carrying required. She absorbed tactical instruction like gospel, asking precise questions and implementing feedback immediately. And she endured the comments. They came in various forms, from various sources. Morrison continued to be the most vocal, his criticism ranging from the cutting to the casual. Others joined in occasionally. Jokes about her height during climbing drills, speculation about whether she'd gotten special treatment at the academy, doubts about her ability to lead male soldiers in combat. Maya absorbed it all with the same neutral expression she'd perfected over 4 years at West Point. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. She just performed, letting her results speak louder than any words could. Sullivan became an unexpected ally, shutting down comments when he heard them, including her naturally in study groups and tactical planning exercises. A few others warmed to her as well. Lieutenant James, a quiet woman from Virginia who'd commissioned through ROTC, Lieutenant Park, a Korean-American officer with a dry sense of humor and a gift for tactics, Lieutenant Washington, a former enlisted soldier who'd earned his commission through OCS and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd already proven everything he needed to prove. They formed a loose group, not quite friends but more than just classmates, united by competence and mutual respect. It made the days easier, knowing that not everyone viewed her as an anomaly or a liability. The 4th week brought their first major field training exercise, a 3-day operation involving tactical planning, movement to contact, and objective seizure. They would be divided into teams, given scenarios, and evaluated on their leadership and decision-making under pressure. Maya drew Team 3, a mix of officers she knew and several she didn't. Morrison was on Team 5. Thank God for small mercies. Their assigned scenario was straightforward on paper. Move through hostile territory, establish an overwatch position, and coordinate with a supporting element to secure a high-value target location. In practice, it would involve 12 hours of movement, minimal sleep, constant decision-making, and the kind of friction that turned simple plans into complex nightmares. "All right," Maya said, gathering her team around the map spread on the ground. Her voice was steady, authoritative without being aggressive. "Here's what we're looking at." She briefed the terrain, the timeline, the objectives. She assigned roles based on each officer's demonstrated strengths: Park on navigation, James on comms, Washington as her second-in-command. She outlined decision points, contingencies, and communication protocols. She spoke clearly, listened carefully, and adjusted her plan based on input from her team. It felt right. It felt natural. This was what she'd trained for. "Questions? What if we make contact before we reach the Overwatch position?" James asked, her finger tracing a potential danger area on the map. "Good question. If contact is unavoidable, we fight through and continue mission. If we can bypass without compromise, we do that. I'll make the call based on the tactical situation, but I want everyone's input on threat assessment." They nodded, their expressions focused and professional. Maya felt the weight of their trust, their willingness to follow her leadership. It was heavier than her ruck, more precious than any metal. The exercise launched at 0200, darkness wrapping around them like a living thing. Maya's team moved through the Georgia forest in a tactical column, their night vision turning the world into shades of green and black. Every sound seemed amplified. Boots on pine needles, equipment rattling despite their best efforts to secure it, their own breathing loud in the humid air. Maya moved near the front of the formation, her senses hyper-alert, processing information from all directions. The terrain here was dense, the trees close together, visibility limited even with night vision. They navigated by terrain association and careful compass work, Park calling out course corrections in whispers, Maya confirming and adjusting their route. 2 hours in, they hit their first complication. "Hold," Washington whispered from his position as rear security. The formation froze, everyone dropping to a knee, weapons ready. Maya moved back to his position, keeping low. "What do you have?" "Movement, about 100 meters back. Could be another team, could be evaluators. Hard to tell." Maya considered their options. Protocol said to report and avoid if possible. Instinct said to confirm the threat before making any decisions. She raised her fist, the signal to hold position, and Leopard crawled back to assess the situation herself. Through her night vision, she could see figures moving through the trees, their discipline good, but not perfect. Another team, definitely. Whether they were tracking Maya's group or just happened to be on a parallel route was unclear. "We're going to shift our route north," Maya whispered, rejoining her team. "Puts us on rougher terrain but gets us away from that tail. We stay quiet, we stay focused, and we don't compromise the mission for a firefight we don't need." They moved out, adjusting their path, sacrificing some speed for security. It was the right call. An hour later, they heard the sounds of simulated combat behind them, 2 teams engaging each other in a drill that would cost them both time and potentially their mission completion. Maya's team reached their Overwatch position as the sun was beginning to paint the eastern sky with streaks of orange and pink. They were tired, sweaty, and moving on fumes, but they'd made it without compromise. Maya positioned them carefully, using the terrain for maximum advantage, establishing security and communication protocols. "James, get comms up with higher. Washington, set the security rotation. Park, double-check our position and make sure we're where we think we are. Everyone else, eat something and hydrate. We've got 6 hours until the objective phase kicks off. The day stretched out in a strange mixture of tedium and tension. They maintained their position, observed their sector, coordinated with the supporting element that was supposed to link up with them. Maya rotated through the positions, checking on her team, making small adjustments, keeping everyone focused despite the fatigue. It was during one of these rotations, as she was moving back from checking on Park's position, that disaster struck. The ground gave way beneath her left foot. Unstable soil, weakened by recent rain and hidden under a layer of pine needles. Maya's body weight shifted, her ankle twisted at an angle it was never meant to go, and she felt something pop, followed immediately by a white-hot spike of agony that shot up her leg and exploded behind her eyes. She bit down on the sound that wanted to escape, converting a scream into a sharp exhale through clenched teeth. Her hands shot out, catching herself on a tree trunk, keeping herself from falling completely. The pain was immediate, overwhelming, consuming. "Lieutenant!" Washington had materialized beside her, his voice low and urgent. "You okay?" Maya tried to put weight on the ankle. Her leg buckled, the pain so intense that black spots danced at the edges of her vision. "Negative," she managed, her voice tight with the effort of controlling her breathing. "Rolled my ankle. Bad." Washington was already signaling for James, who came quickly with the combat lifesaver kit. Maya lowered herself to the ground, her jaw so tight she thought her teeth might crack. Washington and James examined her ankle with practiced efficiency. It was already swelling, the skin discoloring, the joint unstable. "Looks like a bad sprain at minimum," James said quietly. "Could be a fracture. You need to get this looked at by real medical." "We're 6 hours from objective," Maya said, her mind racing through options even as the pain tried to drag her focus away. "We can't abort now." "Chen," Washington started. "We can't abort," Maya repeated, her voice firmer now despite the pain. "This mission is part of our evaluation. If we call for evacuation, the whole team's timeline gets compromised. We've worked too hard for that." She looked at both of them, saw the concern in their faces, the professional calculation happening behind their eyes. They knew she was right about the mission. They also knew she was making a decision that would cost her personally. "Tape it," Maya said, reaching for the med kit. "Tape it tight, give me some ibuprofen, and let's finish this thing." "That's not," James began. "That's an order, Lieutenant." It was the first time Maya had pulled rank during the entire training, and the words felt heavy in her mouth. But Washington and James exchanged a look and nodded. James went to work with the tape, wrapping Maya's ankle with enough pressure to provide stability, while Maya breathed through the pain with a technique she'd learned during plebe summer at West Point. 4 count in, hold 4. 4 count out. Repeat. The ibuprofen barely touched the pain, but it was enough to take the edge off. With Washington's help, Maya got back to her feet. She couldn't put full weight on the left ankle, but she could move if she was careful, if she used a stick for support, if she absolutely refused to acknowledge the screaming agony that shot through her leg with every step. "I'll lead from the center of the formation," Maya said, thinking tactically despite the pain. "Washington, you take point. Park, your rear security. James, stay close to me in case I need support. We're still completing this mission." The next 6 hours were among the most difficult of Maya's life. Every movement was torture, every step a negotiation, between her will and her body's desperate signals to stop. She planned the objective seizure from the center of the formation, her mind sharp even as her body screamed. She coordinated the link-up with the supporting element, executed the tactical plan, and supervised the secure of the objective, all while leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch and biting back sounds of pain. Her team knew. They could see her struggling, see the sweat on her face that had nothing to do with the Georgia heat, see the way she favored her right leg and the white-knuckled grip on her improvised support. But not one of them suggested giving up. Not one of them questioned her leadership. They rallied around her instead, anticipating her needs, executing her orders with precision, making themselves into the extensions of her will that good soldiers always became for good leaders. When they finally reached the extraction point 18 hours after the start of the exercise, Maya was running on nothing but willpower and spite. The evaluators were waiting, their clipboards ready, their expressions professional and unreadable. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached the team, his gaze sweeping across them before landing on Maya. His eyes narrowed slightly when he saw her condition. The improvised crutch, the swollen ankle, the barely suppressed pain in her face. "Lieutenant Chen, report." Maya straightened as much as her injured leg would allow, her voice steady despite everything. "Team 3 successfully completed all mission objectives, Master Sergeant. We reached the overwatch position without compromise, maintained security for the required duration, coordinated with supporting elements, and secured the target location. All team members accounted for, and no mission-critical failures." Rodriguez consulted his clipboard, then looked back at Maya. "Your team came in second overall for time, first for tactical execution, and first for operational security. Outstanding performance." His gaze dropped to her ankle. "You also appear to have seriously injured yourself during the exercise." "Yes, Master Sergeant. Rolled my ankle approximately 12 hours ago." "And continued the mission?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Report to the medical aid station immediately. That's not a suggestion, Lieutenant. That's an order." "Yes, Master Sergeant." The aid station was a temporary facility set up near the training area, staffed by Army medics who'd seen every possible training injury over the years. The medic who examined Maya's ankle was a young specialist with gentle hands and a professional demeanor. "Wow," he said, carefully probing the swollen joint. "You really did a number on this. How long ago did this happen?" "About 12 hours. His eyebrows shot up. "And you've been walking on it?" "Mission requirement." He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that's insane. This needs X-rays, probably an MRI. You might have torn ligaments, possibly fractured something. Walking on this for 12 hours could have made the damage significantly worse." "But did we complete the mission?" Maya asked, her exhaustion making her more direct than she normally would be. The medic's expression softened. "Yeah, ma'am, you completed the mission. Now let's make sure you didn't permanently damage yourself doing it." The X-rays came back, showing no fractures. A minor miracle, according to the orthopedic surgeon who reviewed them at the hospital on base. But the MRI told a different story. A grade 2 ankle sprain with partial ligament tears and significant soft tissue damage. 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, minimum. Physical therapy. Limited weight bearing. No running, no rucking, no field exercises. "You're incredibly lucky," the surgeon told her, his tone suggesting he thought she was also incredibly stupid. "If you'd fully torn those ligaments, you'd be looking at surgery and 6 months of recovery. As it is, you've got a long road ahead." Maya sat on the examination table, her ankle now properly wrapped and immobilized in a walking boot, and felt the weight of the implications settling over her. 6 to 8 weeks meant she'd miss significant portions of the training. She might have to recycle to the next class, extending her time at Fort Benning and delaying her assignment to her first unit. All because she'd made a decision in the moment to complete the mission despite the injury. She'd do it again, she realized, in a heartbeat. Because that's what leaders did. They put mission first. self, last. They made the hard calls and lived with the consequences. The consequences, however, were harder to live with than she'd anticipated. For the next week, Maya existed in a strange limbo. She attended classroom instruction, her booted foot propped on a chair, taking notes with the same meticulous attention to detail she'd always shown. She couldn't participate in the physical training, couldn't join the field exercises, couldn't do any of the practical applications that comprised the bulk of the course. She felt useless, sidelined, like a burden rather than a contributing member of the training class. The comments started again, but with a different tone now. "Heard Chen screwed up her ankle trying to be a hero," someone said in the dining facility, not quite quiet enough. "Guess that's what happens when you're too stubborn to admit you can't hack it." Should have called for evacuation. Now she's holding back her whole team's training timeline. Bet she's just looking for a medical discharge. Easier than actually completing the course. Maya heard them all. Every whisper, every speculation, every casual dismissal of what she'd actually accomplished. She heard them, and she filed them away in that locked place inside where she kept all the other doubts, all the other assumptions, all the other moments when people looked at her and saw something less than what she actually was. Sullivan found her in the company area one evening, studying tactical doctrine in her room with her foot elevated. "Hey," he said from the doorway. "Mind if I come in?" "Door stays open," Maya said automatically. Army regulation for mixed-gender room visits. "But yeah, come in." Sullivan pulled up a chair, his expression serious. "I wanted to check on you. You've been pretty isolated this past week." "I'm fine. Chen." He waited until she looked up from her manual. "You completed a 12-hour mission on a badly sprained ankle. You led your team to the top evaluation scores in the entire class. You made a call that most officers wouldn't have had the guts to make. You're not fine. You're incredible, yes, but you're also beating yourself up for being injured, and that's not okay." Maya felt something crack in her chest, some careful control slipping. "I should have been more careful. Should have watched my step better. Now I'm behind, and my team lost time because of me, and everyone thinks you're tough as hell," Sullivan interrupted. "Everyone who matters, anyway. Morrison and his crew can go pound sand. The rest of us know what you did out there." "Rodriguez hasn't said anything. Neither has Captain Williams. They're probably deciding whether to recycle me or just drop me entirely." "Or," Sullivan said slowly, "they're watching to see how you handle adversity. Because that's what leadership is really about, right? Not the easy moments, the hard ones." Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the doorframe. Master Sergeant Rodriguez stood there, his expression unreadable as always. "Lieutenant Chen, walk with me." It wasn't a request. Maya grabbed her crutches, she'd been issued proper ones to supplement the boot, and followed Rodriguez out into the cooling evening air. He walked slowly, matching his pace to her limited mobility, his hands clasped behind his back. "I've been doing this job for a long time," Rodriguez said after a moment. 23 years, like I said on day one. In that time, I've seen thousands of officers come through this course. Most of them are competent. Some are exceptional. A few are truly outstanding." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're outstanding, Chen. The way you led your team, the tactical decisions you made, the adaptability you showed when your plan met reality. That was textbook leadership. The fact that you did it while seriously injured just makes it more impressive." Maya felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "Don't thank me yet. Because here's the thing about being outstanding. It makes you a target. People who feel threatened by competence will try to tear you down. Some of them will be subtle about it. Others will be direct. And some of them will try to hide behind legitimate concerns while they sabotage you. I can handle it. I know you can. I've watched you handle it for 4 weeks now. But I'm not telling you this to prepare you for other officers in training. I'm telling you this to prepare you for the rest of your career. Rodriguez's voice was quiet but intense. You're going to face this everywhere you go. Every unit, every assignment, every step of the way up the chain of command. Being a female officer in combat arms means fighting 2 battles, the actual mission and the constant need to prove you deserve to be here. I'm aware, Master Sergeant. Are you? He studied her carefully. Because awareness and preparation are different things. You need to understand that some people will never be convinced. No matter how well you perform, no matter how many times you prove yourself, they'll find reasons to question your competence. Your job is not to change their minds. Your job is to be so damn good that their opinions become irrelevant. Maya thought about Captain Williams saying almost the same thing during their first week. Different words, same message. Yes, Master Sergeant. Good. Rodriguez resumed walking, Maya crutching along beside him. Now, about your injury. The surgeon cleared you for limited duty with restrictions. You'll continue classroom instruction and can participate in planning exercises. As your ankle heals, we'll reintegrate you into physical training. You're not getting recycled, and you're not getting dropped. You're going to finish this course with your class, and you're going to do it well. Clear? Relief flooded through her so intensely that she felt momentarily dizzy. Crystal clear, Master Sergeant. Thank you. Stop thanking me. You earned this spot. Now finish earning it. The next 3 weeks were a study in frustration and determination. Maya attacked the classroom instruction with renewed focus, absorbing every lesson, asking questions that demonstrated not just understanding but insight. She couldn't do the physical training yet, but she could support her classmates, helping with planning exercises, offering tactical suggestions, studying with anyone who asked. Slowly, her ankle healed. The swelling receded. The pain diminished from constant agony to occasional sharp reminders. The physical therapist cleared her for limited walking without crutches, then for light jogging, then for progressive weight-bearing exercises. By week 8, Maya was back in the field. Her first ruck march since the injury was a 5-miler with a 50-pound load. Modest by Army standards, but significant for someone still recovering. Maya loaded her ruck with meticulous care, distributing weight properly, adjusting straps for optimal comfort and security. Her ankle was taped beneath her boot, wrapped in a compression sleeve, and she'd taken ibuprofen preemptively. The march started in the pre-dawn darkness, the platoon forming up in the company area with the quiet efficiency of soldiers who'd learned to work together. Maya fell in with her usual group, Sullivan, Park, James, Washington. They'd become a team during her recovery, studying together, planning together, building the kind of trust that would serve them well in actual units. You good? Washington asked quietly as they stepped off. I'm good, Maya confirmed, and she meant it. The first mile was careful, cautious. Maya listened to her ankle, monitored her gait, stayed alert for any signs of instability or pain. The joint held. The tape supported. The conditioning she'd maintained during recovery paid dividends. By mile 3, she'd found her rhythm. By mile 5, she was keeping pace with the middle of the pack, her breathing controlled, her form solid. When they crossed the finish line, Master Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting with his ever-present clipboard. His eyes met Maya's, and he gave a slight nod. Acknowledgement, approval. She'd made it back. The final field exercise came in week 11, a 5-day operation involving all the skills they'd learned over the course: planning, navigation, tactical movement, objective seizure, sustainment operations, and extraction. It was the culminating event, the final proof that they'd absorbed the lessons and could execute the mission. Maya's team drew a complex scenario involving urban operations, which meant clearing buildings, coordinating with supporting elements, and operating in a more constrained environment than the open forests they'd been training in. It was challenging, demanding, and exactly the kind of problem she'd been preparing to solve her entire military career. "All right," Maya said, gathering her team around the sand table she'd constructed to represent their operational area. "Here's the situation." She briefed the intelligence picture, the enemy disposition, the civilian considerations. She outlined her intent, her concept of operations, her specific tasks for each element. She'd learned from the previous field exercise. This time, she built in more contingencies, more decision points, more flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. Questions or concerns? Rules of engagement are pretty restrictive for this scenario, Park noted, studying the overlaid map. Lots of civilians in the area. We need to be tight on target identification. Agreed. That's why we're going to slow our tempo. I'd rather take an extra hour and do this right than rush and create civilian casualties, even simulated ones. Maya tapped the sand table. We clear methodically, we communicate constantly, and we don't take shortcuts. Washington nodded approvingly. What's our contingency if we lose comms with Hire? Good question. If we lose comms for more than 30 minutes, we continue mission on last known guidance, but shift to a more cautious posture. We've got rally points here, here, and here. She indicated positions on the map, in case we need to consolidate. They launched the operation at 0400 on a Tuesday morning. The urban training facility on Fort Benning transformed into a simulated Middle Eastern city, complete with role players, pyrotechnics, and evaluators lurking in every shadow. Maya moved with her team through the pre-dawn darkness, their night vision painting the world in familiar green tones. The first building clearance went smoothly. Textbook room entry, proper clearing procedures, good communication. They identified 2 enemy combatants, role players with training weapons, and 1 civilian, a role player who did an excellent job of appearing terrified, securing the building without incident. The second building was more complex, multiple floors, more rooms, more angles to clear. Maya positioned her team carefully, assigned responsibilities, and supervised the clearance with the same meticulous attention to detail she brought to everything else. They were halfway through the second floor when everything went sideways. The sound of gunfire erupted from outside, not training simulation fire, but real weapons discharge. Close, too close. Then screaming, high-pitched and terrified, cutting through the morning air like a knife. Maya's training took over instantly. "Halt exercise!" she shouted, the universal command to stop all training immediately. Her team froze, weapons lowered, everyone looking to her for guidance. "Real-world emergency," one of the evaluators said, appearing from his observation position with his radio already in hand. "All training suspended. Stand by for instructions." But Maya was already moving. Years of West Point training, countless hours of emergency response drills, and an instinct honed by 4 years of pressure made the decision instantaneous. She burst out of the building, her weapons safe but ready, scanning for the source of the screaming. The scene that greeted her was chaos. A civilian vehicle, not supposed to be anywhere near the training area, had somehow ended up in the middle of the urban operations site. The driver's side door was open, and a man in civilian clothes was collapsed on the ground, bleeding heavily from his leg. 20 feet away, Near the perimeter fence, a woman was screaming and trying to drag a child toward safety. But it was the child that made Maya's blood freeze. A girl, maybe 7 years old, was lying motionless on the ground near the vehicle. There was blood spreading from beneath her small body, dark and terrible against the dirt. The woman, her mother, Maya's mind supplied automatically, was trying to reach her while also bleeding from her arm and unable to move properly. The evaluator with the radio was shouting into it, calling for real medical evacuation, his voice tight with controlled panic. Other officers were emerging from buildings, confused and trying to process the sudden shift from training to emergency. Maya was already running. Her ankle protested. It was healed but not fully recovered, not ready for the sprint she was demanding of it. She ignored the pain, the warning signals, everything except the small body on the ground and the expanding pool of blood. Training took over. Combat lifesaver course, basic trauma care, triage principles. She slid to her knees beside the child, her hands already moving to assess injuries. The girl was unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. The blood was coming from her left side, just below the rib cage. A deep laceration, possibly from vehicle debris, definitely arterial based on the pulsing flow. "Medic!" Maya shouted, knowing the call would bring the training cadre's medical personnel. "I need a combat lifesaver kit now!" Her hands were already applying pressure to the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. The girl was so small beneath her hands, so fragile. Maya's training said to assess for additional injuries, check airway and breathing, follow the systematic approach. Her instinct said this child was dying and needed intervention now. "Stay with me," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Help is coming." Sullivan materialized beside her with a combat lifesaver kit, his face pale but his hands steady. "What do you need?" "Trauma dressing, biggest one in the kit. And get someone to apply a tourniquet to the father. Looks like a leg wound, probably femoral artery involvement." Maya worked with the focused intensity she'd learned during countless training evolutions. She packed the wound with the trauma dressing, applying direct pressure while simultaneously assessing the girl's level of consciousness and respiratory status. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop. The dressing was already saturated. "I need another trauma dressing," Maya said, her voice calm, clinical. "And someone get an update on EMS arrival time." The next 5 minutes were among the longest of Maya's life. She maintained pressure on the wound, talking constantly to the little girl, even though the child showed no signs of consciousness. She directed other officers to treat the parents, to establish a security perimeter, to keep the training role players away from the emergency. The evaluator with the radio reported that civilian EMS was en route, but still 8 minutes out. Maya did the math instinctively. Arterial bleeding, young child. Significant blood loss, already evident. 8 minutes might be too long. "We need to transport," Maya said, making a command decision without hesitation. "Sullivan, get a vehicle. Washington, help me prepare her for movement. Park, brief whoever's driving on the fastest route to the hospital. James, go with the parents in a separate vehicle." "Lieutenant," the evaluator started, "protocol says to wait for... Protocol assumes EMS can arrive quickly enough to prevent a pediatric trauma death," Maya interrupted, her voice sharp with authority she didn't know she possessed. "This child has already lost significant blood volume. Her breathing is compromised, her skin is cold and clammy. She's going into shock. And if we wait 8 more minutes for EMS to arrive and then transport, we're looking at 15 to 20 minutes before she receives definitive care. She doesn't have 15 minutes." The evaluator looked at her for one long moment, then nodded. "Do it." They moved with military precision. Sullivan brought a training vehicle, a Humvee designed for tactical exercises but serviceable for emergency transport. Maya maintained constant pressure on the wound, while Washington and Park carefully lifted the little girl, supporting her head and stabilizing her body. They secured her in the back of the Humvee, Maya climbing in beside her, never once releasing pressure on the injury. "Drive fast but smooth," Maya instructed the soldier behind the wheel, a specialist from the training cadre who knew the base like the back of his hand. "Fast for time. Smooth for the patient. Call ahead to the hospital and tell them we're coming in hot with a pediatric trauma." The drive was a nightmare of controlled urgency. Every bump in the road sent fresh blood seeping through Maya's fingers. Every second felt like an eternity. The little girl's breathing grew more labored, more shallow. Her lips were taking on a bluish tinge. "Stay with me," Maya kept saying, her voice a constant presence in the chaos. "Stay with me. You're doing great. Keep breathing. Help is almost here." She didn't know if the girl could hear her, didn't know if consciousness was even present behind those closed eyelids. But she'd learned at West Point that the sound of a calm, confident voice could provide an anchor in crisis. For the victim, for the responders, for everyone involved. They screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance of Martin Army Community Hospital. The automatic doors burst open and a trauma team rushed out. Nurses, doctors, equipment, controlled chaos that was somehow beautiful in its coordination. "Female child, approximately 7 years old," Maya reported, her voice steady even as her hands were covered in blood. "Deep laceration to left torso, possibly involving liver or spleen. Significant blood loss, signs of shock, decreasing level of consciousness. Bleeding partially controlled with trauma dressings and direct pressure. Patient has been in my care for approximately 12 minutes. The trauma team took over with practiced efficiency, transferring the girl to a gurney, cutting away clothing, starting IVs, moving with the synchronized precision of professionals who did this every day. Maya stepped back, her job complete, her hands still raised and dripping blood. A nurse grabbed her arm gently. "You did good, Lieutenant. Come with me. Let's get you cleaned up." Maya followed mechanically, her body moving while her mind was still back in that Humvee, feeling the small body beneath her hands, the terrible fragility of life measured in heartbeats and blood pressure. The nurse led her to a sink, helped her wash the blood off, her voice kind and matter-of-fact. "First time doing trauma care on a child?" "Yes," Maya managed. "It's harder than adults. Smaller bodies, faster deterioration, higher emotional stakes." The nurse handed her paper towels. "But you kept it together. You did exactly what needed to be done." Maya dried her hands, noticing distantly that they were shaking now, the adrenaline dump hitting her system with delayed force. She'd been steady during the crisis, rock solid in the moment. Now, in the aftermath, her body was catching up to what her mind had compartmentalized. "The girl," Maya said. "Will she—" "The trauma team is excellent. She got here fast, which is the most important factor in these situations. You gave her the best chance possible." It wasn't the certainty Maya wanted, but it was honest. She nodded, accepting it, and let the nurse lead her to a waiting area where the rest of her team had gathered. They looked at her with expressions she couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of statements to military police, reports to the training cadre, and the slow, grinding wait for news about the little girl. Maya sat in the waiting room, her uniform still stained with blood despite her cleaned hands, and tried not to think about how small the child had felt, how much blood there had been, how close to death they'd probably been. Master Sergeant Rodriguez arrived with Captain Williams. They pulled Maya aside, their expressions grave. "Lieutenant Chen," Rodriguez said, "tell me what happened." Maya reported everything systematically, the disruption of the training, the emergency, her assessment and actions, the decision to transport rather than wait for EMS. She spoke clearly, professionally, without embellishment or excuse. When she finished, Rodriguez and Williams exchanged a look. "You made a command decision that overrode standard protocol," Williams said. "You took responsibility for transporting a critically injured civilian without waiting for proper EMS arrival. Those are significant actions that will need to be reviewed." Maya's stomach dropped. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." "Do you regret your decision?" Maya thought about the question carefully. About protocol versus reality. Rules versus circumstances, the weight of command, and the responsibility of leadership. "No, ma'am. Given the same situation again, I'd make the same call." Williams's expression didn't change. "Why?" "Because protocol is designed for typical situations, ma'am. It assumes certain response times, certain capabilities, certain resources. In this case, the situation was atypical. We had immediate medical capability, faster transport, and a patient who couldn't afford to wait. The protocol would have resulted in worse outcomes. Leadership means knowing when to follow the rules and when the rules don't fit the situation." Rodriguez's weathered face creased into something that might have been approval. "And if your decision had resulted in worse outcomes, if something had gone wrong during transport?" "Then I would take full responsibility for that decision, Master Sergeant. The burden of command includes the consequences of our choices." Before either instructor could respond, a doctor in scrubs emerged from the emergency department. He looked tired, but not defeated, which Maya took as a good sign. "The family of the vehicle accident victims?" he said, looking around the waiting room. The father had been treated and released, his leg wound requiring stitches but no major interventions. The mother was being treated for a fractured arm. And the little girl. "Your daughter is in surgery right now," the doctor told the parents, who had rushed over at his appearance. "The laceration involved her spleen, which we've had to remove. She'd lost a significant amount of blood and was in severe shock when she arrived. But she's alive, she's stable, and the surgical team is confident she'll make a full recovery." The mother collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing with relief. The father's eyes found Maya's across the waiting room. "You," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved her. The medics said you kept pressure on the wound, that you made the call to transport, that if we'd waited any longer—" He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. The doctor turned to look at Maya, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You're the lieutenant who brought her in?" "Yes, sir." "The trauma team said your field care was excellent. The wound packing, the pressure maintenance, the decision to transport, all of it probably saved this child's life. She was minutes away from exsanguination when you arrived here." Maya felt something break open in her chest, relief and emotion flooding through the careful control she'd maintained. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for telling me." The doctor nodded and returned to the emergency department. The parents approached Maya, their faces streaked with tears, their gratitude overwhelming and almost painful to receive. "Thank you," the mother kept saying. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Maya didn't know what to say. The enormity of what had happened was too large to fit into words. She'd saved a child's life, actually saved it, not in training, not in simulation, but in reality where blood was real and death was permanent, and decisions mattered in ways that left marks on the soul. "I'm just glad she's going to be okay," Maya finally managed. The training cadre allowed her to return to the company area, late that afternoon. The field exercise had been canceled for her class. Protocol required a full investigation of the incident before training could resume. Maya walked into the barracks to find her entire platoon waiting. They erupted into applause when she entered. "Chen!" Sullivan shouted, grinning widely. "The hero returns!" Maya felt her face flush. "I just did what anyone—" "Don't give us that humble crap," Park interrupted, still clapping. "You saved a kid's life. A child. That's incredible." Even officers who'd been cool to her, distant during the training, were applauding now. The barrier that had existed, subtle, invisible, but real, seemed to have dissolved. She'd proven something today that transcended gender, size, or any of the other superficial factors people used to make judgment. She'd proven she could lead when it mattered most. But not everyone was celebrating. Morrison stood at the back of the group, his expression dark. When the applause finally died down, he spoke up. "Let's not forget that Chen violated protocol. She transported a civilian without proper authorization, without waiting for EMS, without following established procedures. What if something had gone wrong? What if the girl had died en route? Chen would be facing charges right now." The room went silent. Maya felt the shift in atmosphere, the way the celebration dimmed under the weight of his words. "But nothing did go wrong," Washington said, his voice hard. "The girl lived because of Chen's quick thinking and courage." "This time," Morrison shot back, "next time someone makes a cowboy decision like that and people die. Rules exist for a reason." Maya took a slow breath, feeling eyes on her from all directions. She could stay silent, let others defend her, avoid the confrontation. That was the safe play. But she was done being safe. "You're right, Morrison," she said clearly. "Rules do exist for a reason. They provide structure, predictability, and guidance for the majority of situations we'll face. But leadership isn't about blindly following rules. It's about understanding the purpose behind those rules and recognizing when circumstances require adaptation." She stepped forward, meeting his gaze directly. That little girl was dying. Arterial bleeding, shock, rapid deterioration. EMS was 8 minutes out, which meant 15 to 20 minutes before she'd receive definitive care. I assessed the situation, weighed the risks, and made a command decision that I believed gave her the best chance of survival. Was it risky? Yes. Could it have gone wrong? Absolutely. But doing nothing was guaranteed to result in her death. Sometimes leadership means taking the uncertain risk, rather than accepting the certain failure. Morrison's jaw tightened. Easy to say when it worked out. "You're right about that too," Maya agreed. "If she'd died, I'd be taking responsibility for that outcome. That's the burden of command. You own your decisions and their consequences. But the alternative is paralysis, is letting people die because you're too afraid of being wrong to make the hard call. I'd rather be the officer who took the risk to save a life than the one who let someone die because protocol felt safer." The room was absolutely silent. Maya could feel the weight of attention, the way her words were landing, the shift in perception happening in real time. Morrison opened his mouth to respond, but Master Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through the tension. "Attention!" he barked from the doorway. Everyone snapped to attention instantly. Rodriguez entered the room, his expression unreadable as always, Captain Williams following behind him. "At ease," Williams said. "Lieutenant Chen, step forward." Maya's heart hammered as she moved to stand before the two instructors. This was it, the official response to her actions, the judgment that would define whether she'd made a heroic decision or a career-ending mistake. Rodriguez pulled a folder from under his arm, and opened it deliberately. Lieutenant Maya Chen, he read formally. At approximately 0530 hours today, you responded to a civilian emergency during a training exercise. Your actions included immediate triage and treatment of a critically injured minor, command decisions regarding emergency medical transport, and direct life-saving interventions that, according to the Martin Army Community Hospital Trauma Team, prevented the death of a 7-year-old civilian. He looked up from the folder, his eyes meeting Maya's. The investigation into the incident is ongoing. However, preliminary findings indicate that your medical care was appropriate and skillful. Your decision to transport was tactically sound given the circumstances, and your leadership during the emergency was exemplary. He paused. The hospital commander has specifically noted that your actions were consistent with the highest standards of the medical profession and the Army values. Relief washed through Maya so intensely that she felt her knees weaken slightly. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, the company commander has recommended you for an Army Commendation Medal for your actions today. The paperwork is being processed through channels. The room erupted behind her. Cheers, applause, excited voices. Maya stood frozen, trying to process what she was hearing. A medal. An official commendation. Recognition not just for completing training, but for actually saving a life. William stepped forward, her expression warmer than Maya had ever seen it. You did something remarkable today, Chen. Something that reminded all of us why we wear this uniform. The Army doesn't just need officers who can follow procedures. We need officers who can think critically, who can adapt to chaos, who can make life-or-death decisions under pressure and live with the consequences. She extended her hand. You're exactly the kind of leader we need. Maya shook her hand, feeling tears threatening for the first time since the whole ordeal had begun. Thank you, ma'am. After Rodriguez and Williams dismissed the platoon, Maya found herself surrounded by her classmates. The barriers that had existed, the skepticism, the judgment, the careful distance had evaporated. They wanted to hear the story, wanted to understand her decision-making process, wanted to shake her hand and express their respect. Even Morrison approached eventually, his expression complicated, but not hostile. Chen, he said quietly, what you did today was impressive. It wasn't an apology for all the comments, all the doubt, all the subtle and not so subtle ways he'd questioned her presence in the training. But it was acknowledgement, and from Morrison, that was significant. Thanks, Maya said simply. He nodded once and walked away, leaving Maya with the strange sensation of having crossed some invisible threshold. She'd been tested not just by the training, but by reality itself, and she'd passed in a way that transcended any classroom exercise or field evaluation. The next 2 days passed in a blur of media attention and official interviews. The story had gotten out. Army officer saves child's life during training exercise, and the Public Affairs Office was carefully managing the narrative. Maya gave interviews to the local news, to Army publications, always deflecting credit, always emphasizing that she'd just done what she was trained to do. But privately, alone in her room at night, she let herself feel the weight of it. The fear she'd suppressed during the emergency, the adrenaline crash that left her shaking, the profound responsibility of having held a child's life in her hands and not failed. On the 3rd day after the incident, Maya was in the company classroom reviewing notes for an upcoming test when Master Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Chen, grab your cover and come with me. She followed him outside, squinting in the bright Georgia sunshine. A line of black SUVs was pulling up to the company area. Official-looking vehicles with tinted windows and the unmistakable presence of high-ranking authority. What's going on, Master Sergeant? You'll see. The SUVs stopped, and men in suits emerged first. Secret Service? Maya realized with a jolt of shock, recognizing the earpieces and the alert scanning of the area. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened, and a man in an army uniform stepped out. Not just any uniform. The distinctive rank insignia of a 4-star general. Maya's eyes widened. General Marcus Reeves, Commanding General of the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command, one of the most powerful officers in the entire Army. And walking beside him, helped carefully by the Secret Service agents, was a small figure in civilian clothes, the little girl, the one Maya had saved. Her name was Sophie Reeves, Maya learned in the stunning moments that followed. The general's granddaughter. The family had been driving through Fort Benning on their way to visit the general at his headquarters when their vehicle had suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, veering off the road and into the training area. The resulting accident had caused the injuries that had nearly killed Sophie. General Reeves approached Maya with an entourage of senior officers, his face a mixture of military bearing and grandfatherly emotion. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, and the weight of authority in his voice made Maya unconsciously straighten to attention. "At tart. Ease, soldier." She relaxed slightly, but her heart was hammering. "Sir," she managed. Reeves looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw in his eyes something she'd never expected to see from a 4-star general, gratitude bordering on worship. "You saved my granddaughter's life," he said simply. "The doctors told me that if you hadn't acted immediately, if you hadn't made the decision to transport her against protocol, if you hadn't kept pressure on that wound with perfect technique for 12 critical minutes, she would have died before the ambulance even arrived." He took a step closer, and Maya noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. "Sophie is everything to me, Lieutenant. Everything. She's the light of my life, the joy of my retirement years, the reason I believe in the future. And you saved her. You gave her back to me, to her parents, to everyone who loves her." Sophie herself stepped forward then, holding her grandfather's hand. She was pale, moving carefully, but alive. So beautifully, miraculously alive. "Thank you," she said in a small voice. "My grandpa says you're a hero." Maya dropped to one knee, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level despite the protest from her still healing ankle. "You're very brave, Sophie. You were so strong." "Can I hug you?" Maya opened her arms, and Sophie stepped into them, her small body warm and vital against Maya's chest. Over the little girl's shoulder, Maya saw General Reeves wipe his eyes unashamedly. When Sophie stepped back, the general pulled something from his pocket. A coin, Maya realized. But not just any coin. The personal coin of a 4-star general, bearing the insignia of TRADOC and Reeves's own signature. "This doesn't begin to repay the debt I owe you," Reeves said, pressing the coin into Maya's hand. "But I want you to know that as long as I wear this uniform, you have an ally. You have someone who will remember what you did, who will stand up for you, who will ensure that your courage and your skill are recognized and rewarded." He stepped back and saluted her, a 4-star general saluting a second lieutenant, which was so far outside normal protocol that Maya's mind momentarily stuttered. But she returned the salute crisply, her hand moving on pure muscle memory. "There's more," Reeves continued. He turned to one of the officers in his entourage, a colonel with an aide's aiguillette. "Colonel Harris has something for you." The colonel stepped forward holding a folder. "Lieutenant Chen, General Reeves has personally submitted you for the Soldier's Medal, the Army's highest award for heroism not involving actual combat with an enemy. The paperwork has been expedited through channels, and the award has been approved." Maya felt her knees go weak. The Soldier's Medal. It was one of the most prestigious awards in the Army, ranking above even the Bronze Star in the order of precedence. Officers spent entire careers without receiving such recognition. Additionally, Colonel Tos, Harris continued, you've been honor graduate of your officer basic course. Your performance throughout training, combined with your actions during the emergency, have distinguished you as the top officer in your class. Honor graduate, the best of the best, the officer who'd demonstrated superior performance across all evaluated areas. Maya had worked for 4 years at West Point to be good enough, strong enough, skilled enough to prove she belonged. She'd endured doubts and comments, and the constant pressure to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. And now she was being recognized not just as competent, but as exemplary. There's one more thing, General Reeves said, his voice taking on a different tone. Lieutenant Chen, I've looked at your file. Your preference sheet for your first duty assignment lists several infantry units, with the 101st Airborne as your top choice. Maya's breath caught. The 101st was legendary. The Screaming Eagles, one of the most storied divisions in Army history. She'd listed it as her dream assignment, but had never actually expected to receive it. Junior officers rarely got their top choices. I've made some calls, Reeves said with a slight smile. I happen to know the commanding general of the 101st quite well. As of this morning, you have orders to report to 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, upon completion of this course. Maya couldn't speak. Her top choice, her dream assignment. All because she'd done what she was trained to do, what any officer should do, act decisively to save a life. Sir, she finally managed, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue to be the kind of officer you showed yourself to be, Reeves replied. Say you'll lead with courage, with intelligence, with the moral clarity to make hard decisions when lives are at stake. Say you'll remember that the uniform we wear is about service, to the nation, to our soldiers, to the innocent people we protect. Yes, sir. I will. I promise. Reeves nodded, satisfied. Outstanding. Now, there's someone else who wants to thank you. Sophie's parents emerged from one of the SUVs, an Army colonel and his wife, both looking as emotionally overwrought as the general. They approached Maya with tears streaming down their faces. We don't have words, Sophie's mother said, her voice breaking. You gave us our daughter back. You gave us everything. The next hour was a blur of photographs, handshakes, and conversations with the general's entourage. The entire officer basic course had been called into formation to witness the general's visit, and Maya could feel their eyes on her. Respect, admiration, and something else. Recognition that she'd proven herself in the most fundamental way possible. When the SUVs finally departed, Maya stood in the Georgia sunshine holding General Reeves's personal coin, her orders to the 101st Airborne, and the knowledge that she'd been submitted for one of the Army's highest decorations. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached her, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. How does it feel, Lieutenant? Maya thought about the question, about the little girl who was alive because of her actions, about the comments and doubts that had dogged her throughout training, about the moment when she'd had to choose between protocol and instinct, between safety and courage. It feels like validation, Master Sergeant. Like proof that all the hard work, all the training, all the times I wanted to quit but didn't, it all mattered. It did matter, it does matter, and it will continue to matter every day for the rest of your career. Rodriguez held out his hand. You've earned your place, Chen. Never let anyone make you doubt that again. She shook his hand. feeling the strength in his grip, the respect in his eyes. The final 2 weeks of Officer Basic course passed quickly. Maya threw herself into the remaining training with renewed confidence, her performance already strong, but now elevated by the knowledge that she'd proven herself not just in training, but in reality. The soldier's medal paperwork progressed through channels. The story of her actions spread throughout Fort Benning and beyond, and the comments stopped. Not completely. There would always be skeptics, always be people whose prejudices were stronger than evidence. But the majority of her classmates treated her now with the respect she'd earned, the recognition she deserved. Morrison never apologized explicitly, but he did approach her one evening during study hours. "Chen," he said, his voice awkward. "I've been thinking about what you said. About leadership and taking risks and owning your decisions." Maya looked up from her notes, waiting. "I was wrong," Morrison continued, the words clearly difficult for him. "Wrong about you, wrong about a lot of things. You're a better officer than I am, and you deserved better treatment than I gave you." It was the closest thing to an apology she'd get from him, Maya knew. And it was enough. "We all have room to grow," she said simply. "That's what training is for." Graduation day arrived with ceremony and formality. The entire class stood in formation wearing their dress uniforms, the Georgia sun beating down as senior officers gave speeches about leadership and service, and the responsibility they were assuming as newly minted Army officers. When Master Sergeant Rodriguez called her name to receive her honor graduate designation, Maya walked across the stage with her head high and her shoulders back. The applause from her classmates was genuine and enthusiastic. Captain Williams handed her the certificate personally, along with a smile that conveyed pride and satisfaction. "You've earned this, Chen. Multiple times over. Go forth and lead soldiers. The Army is lucky to have you." After the ceremony, Maya found herself surrounded by family. Her parents had flown in from California, her younger brother, grinning with obvious pride. Her father embraced her tightly, his calloused hands gentle on her shoulders, just like they'd been when she was 7 years old and learning to be an oak tree. "I'm so proud of you, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So incredibly proud." Her mother held her face between her hands, studying her with the intensity only mothers possessed. "You saved a child's life. You're a hero." "I just did what I was trained to do," Maya said automatically. "No," her father corrected gently. "You did what you were meant to do. There's a difference." Sullivan, Park, James, and Washington found her after the family photos, the 5 of them forming a tight circle away from the larger crowd. "Keep in touch," Sullivan said, pulling her into a hug. "We're all headed to different units, but we're still a team." "Always," Maya agreed. "You set the standard," Washington added. "For all of us. Don't forget that when things get hard at Campbell." "Things will get hard everywhere," Park said with his characteristic pragmatism. "But we've got this. We're ready." James, normally the quietest of the group, spoke last. "You inspired me, Chen. Watching you handle everything, the training, the comments, the pressure, and then seeing you save that little girl's life. You showed me what real leadership looks like." Maya felt her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. "We inspired each other. That's what good soldiers do." They stood together for a long moment, 5 officers about to embark on careers that would take them to different corners of the Army and the world. They'd forged bonds in the crucible of training, proven themselves individually and collectively, and emerged ready for whatever came next. As the sun set over Fort Benning, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya Chen stood in her dress uniform with her honor graduate certificate in one hand and General Reeves's coin in her pocket. Her ankle had healed. Her confidence had been forged. Her place in the army had been earned beyond any possible doubt. She thought about Sophie Reeves, recovering at home with her family, all it because of decisions made in seconds under pressure. She thought about the comments and doubts she'd endured and overcome. She thought about the 4 years at West Point, the 12 weeks at Fort Benning, the entire journey that had brought her to this moment. And she thought about the 101st Airborne Division waiting for her at Fort Campbell. New challenges, new soldiers to lead, new opportunities to prove herself and grow. She was ready. Maya had spent her entire life being told, in ways both subtle and overt, that she didn't belong. That she was too small, too different, too female for the roles she aspired to fill. She'd proven them wrong through excellence, through courage, through the simple act of doing what was right when the moment demanded it. As she walked toward her family, her future spreading out before her like an unwritten story, Maya Chen carried herself with the bearing of an officer who'd earned every ribbon, every qualification, every moment of respect. She'd been tested by training and by reality itself, and she'd passed both. 2 months later, Maya stood in the orderly room of 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division, reporting for her first day as a platoon leader. Fort Campbell stretched across the Kentucky-Tennessee border, massive and bustling with the energy of one of the Army's premier divisions. The brigade executive officer, a major named Thompson, reviewed her file with an expression that suggested he'd already formed opinions. West Point, honor graduate from OBC, Soldier's Medal pending. He looked up at her. That's an impressive start to a career, Lieutenant. Thank you, sir. You'll be taking over 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion. They're a good group of soldiers, experienced, professional, but they've been without a platoon leader for 6 weeks while we waited for you to arrive. The platoon sergeant is Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, 11 years in service, 2 deployments. He's solid, knows his job, and he'll be evaluating you as much as you'll be leading him. Maya nodded. This was expected. Platoon sergeants were the backbone of the Army, the experienced NCOs who actually ran the day-to-day operations, while officers provided guidance and leadership. Your company commander is Captain Rodriguez, no relation to your OBC instructor, though they apparently know each other from some school. He's demanding but fair. Meet his standards and you'll do fine. Fall short, and he'll make your life difficult. Thompson closed the file. Questions? No, sir. When do I meet my platoon? Right now. They're in the company area waiting for you. Maya followed Thompson through the brigade headquarters and across the company area to a large building where 38 soldiers stood in formation. They wore their ACUs, their bearing professional, their eyes curious and assessing. Staff Sergeant Williams called them to attention as Maya approached. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything at once. 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, reporting as ordered, sir, Williams said, saluting Major Thompson. At ease, Thompson gestured to Maya. This is 2nd Lieutenant Chen, your new platoon leader. Lieutenant Chen comes to us from Fort Benning with distinguished credentials. I expect you to give her the same professional respect and support you'd give any officer. He departed, leaving Maya standing before her platoon for the first time. 38 soldiers, mostly men, mostly older than her, all with more experience in an operational unit than she possessed. She could feel their assessment, their judgment forming in real time. Staff Sergeant Williams approached her, saluting crisply. Welcome to 2nd Platoon, ma'am. Would you like to address the soldiers? Maya. returned the salute, and turned to face her platoon. This was the moment, the first impression that would set the tone for everything that followed. "Second platoon," she said, her voice carrying across the formation. "My name is Lieutenant Chen. I'm honored to be your platoon leader." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I know what you're thinking right now. You're wondering if I'm competent. You're wondering if I can lead you in training, and if it comes to it, in combat. You're wondering if I earned my position or if I'm here to fill some quota. Those are legitimate questions, and I'm not going to try to convince you with words. I'm going to show you through my actions, through my decisions, through my willingness to learn from your experience and lead with integrity." She made eye contact with soldiers across the formation, letting them see the certainty in her face. "I don't expect your respect automatically because of these bars on my chest. Respect is earned through competence, through character, through the daily choice to put mission and soldiers first. I will earn your respect. And in return, I will give you leadership that is fair, consistent, and focused on making this the best platoon in the battalion." She nodded to Williams. "Staff Sergeant Williams, dismiss the platoon. I want to meet with squad leaders in 30 minutes for initial counseling." "Yes, ma'am." Williams faced the platoon. "Platoon dismissed." The formation broke, soldiers dispersing with the casual efficiency of experienced troops. Maya watched them go, noting the body language, the quiet conversations, the way they glanced back at her with expressions ranging from skeptical to cautiously optimistic. Williams approached her after the soldiers had departed. "That was a good first speech, ma'am. Direct, honest, no bullshit." "Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I'm going to need your help. You know these soldiers, know the unit, know how things work here. I'm coming in new, and while I've got training, I don't have operational experience. I need you to teach me, to tell me when I'm making mistakes, to help me be the officer these soldiers deserve." Williams studied her for a long moment. Most new lieutenants come in thinking they know everything, ready to change the world without understanding what they're changing. You're different. I learned at West Point that arrogance is the enemy of growth. I'm confident in my training, but I'm humble about my experience. Good answer. Williams pulled out a notebook. Let's talk about your squad leaders. You've got 3 squads. First squad is led by Sergeant Jake Morrison. Maya's head snapped up. Morrison? You know him? There was a Morrison at my officer basic course. Probably not the same person. Probably not. Army's full of Morrisons, Williams continued. Morrison's a good NCO, bit rough around the edges, but solid in the field. Second squad is Sergeant First Class Martinez. She's outstanding. Been in for 13 years, knows infantry tactics better than most officers. Third squad is Sergeant Davis, younger but sharp, good with soldiers. Maya took notes, absorbing information, building her mental picture of the platoon's leadership structure. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing the platoon's current status, upcoming training events, and the personalities and capabilities of individual soldiers. When the squad leaders arrived for their counseling sessions, Maya was prepared. She met with each one individually, establishing expectations, listening to their input, building the foundation of a professional relationship. Sergeant Morrison turned out to be a completely different person from the officer candidate who'd given her such grief during training. This Morrison was professional, respectful, and clearly competent. Sergeant First Class Martinez was exactly as Williams had described. Sharp, experienced, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd proven herself repeatedly. Sergeant Davis was enthusiastic and detail-oriented, asking good questions about Maya's leadership philosophy and training priorities. By the end of her first day, Maya was exhausted but satisfied. The platoon seemed solid. The leadership was professional. The soldiers were watching her carefully, but they were giving her a chance to prove herself. That was all she could ask for. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of training, evaluations, and the daily grind of leading soldiers. Maya threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to every challenge in her military career. She learned the platoon's standard operating procedures, memorized every soldier's name and background, studied tactics and training manuals until she could recite them in her sleep. She made mistakes. Lots of them. Small mistakes in land navigation during night exercises, errors in judgment about training priorities, missteps in the complex social dynamics of a platoon where relationships and personalities mattered as much as skills. But she learned from every mistake. She listened to Williams when he pulled her aside to offer corrections. She accepted feedback from her squad leaders. She asked questions when she didn't understand something, rather than pretending to know. And slowly, steadily, she earned her platoon's respect. It showed in small ways at first. Soldiers volunteering for difficult tasks when she asked. Squad leaders seeking her input on decisions. The way conversation didn't stop when she walked into the platoon area, the way she was included naturally in the informal culture of the unit. 3 months in, during a major field training exercise, Maya's platoon was tasked with securing a key objective against an opposing force. The tactical situation was complex. Multiple approaches, limited intelligence, and a tight timeline. Maya planned the operation carefully, incorporating input from her squad leaders, building contingencies, and rehearsing until every soldier knew their role. The execution was nearly flawless. 2nd Platoon secured the objective ahead of schedule, with minimal casualties, simulated, and executed their assigned mission so well that the battalion commander personally visited to commend their performance. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant Chen," the battalion commander said, a lieutenant colonel with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes. "Your platoon showed excellent tactical discipline and aggressive execution. That's the standard I expect from this battalion." After he departed, Williams pulled Maya aside with a rare smile. "You've got it now, ma'am. The platoon's starting to really gel, and they trust you. That's everything." Maya felt the warmth of achievement spreading through her chest. "We did this together, Staff Sergeant. I couldn't do any of this without you and the squad leaders." "That's what makes you a good officer, ma'am. You understand that leadership is a team effort." 4 months after Maya's arrival at Fort Campbell, the formal award ceremony for her Soldier's Medal took place during a brigade formation. The entire brigade stood in formation on the parade field, over 3,000 soldiers in dress uniforms, as Maya stood at attention before the brigade commander. General Reeves himself had traveled from his headquarters to present the award personally, an honor that underscored the significance of what Maya had done. "2nd Lieutenant Maya Chen," Reeves read from the citation, his voice carrying across the field, "for exceptionally valorous achievement while participating in aerial flight. On the morning of 15th September 2020, Chief 4, during a training exercise at Fort Benning, Georgia, Lieutenant Chen responded without hesitation to a civilian emergency involving a critically injured child. Demonstrating extraordinary courage, medical skill, and leadership under pressure, Lieutenant Chen provided immediate life-saving trauma care and made the decisive command decision to transport the victim to definitive medical treatment, directly saving the child's life. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Army, and the Department of Defense." He pinned the medal to Maya's dress uniform, the distinctive red and blue ribbon with white stripes standing out against the army green fabric. Then he stepped back and saluted her, just as he had at Fort Benning. "You saved my granddaughter, Lieutenant. I will never forget what you did, and neither will the Army." The formation erupted in applause, 3,000 soldiers acknowledging one lieutenant's courage and competence. Maya stood at attention, her eyes forward, her bearing professional, but inside she felt something settle into place. A sense of belonging, of having truly earned her position, of being not just accepted, but respected. After the ceremony, her platoon surrounded her, their pride obvious. "That's our platoon leader," Sergeant Martinez said, grinning. "Badass soldier, saves kids' lives, and still makes sure we're ready for inspection on Monday." The soldiers laughed, and Maya found herself laughing with them. These were her soldiers now, her platoon, her responsibility, her team. She'd come a long way from that first morning at Fort Benning, standing on the edge of the training field and listening to doubts about whether she belonged. She belonged. She'd proven it through training, through crisis, through the daily choice to be excellent rather than adequate. She'd earned her place not through favoritism or luck, but through competence, courage, and character. As the formation dispersed and she walked back to the company area with her platoon, Maya caught sight of her reflection in a building window. She wore the uniform with pride, the soldier's medal visible on her chest, her bearing confident and sure. She'd spent her entire life being told she was too small, too different, too female for the army she wanted to serve. She'd heard the doubts, endured the comments, faced the skepticism. And she'd proven every single doubt wrong. Not by arguing, not by defending, not by demanding recognition, but by simply being so undeniably competent that the doubts became irrelevant. That evening, alone in her quarters, Maya pulled out her phone and found the photo someone had taken during the award ceremony. General Reeves pinning the medal to her uniform, her platoon standing in formation behind her, the American flag rippling in the Kentucky wind. She sent it to her father with a simple message: "Still an oak tree." His response came immediately. "Always were, always will be. I'm so proud of you, Maya." Maya set the phone down and looked at the soldier's medal in its presentation case. She thought about Sophie Reeves, fully recovered now, and back to being a normal 7-year-old girl. She thought about the comments from Morrison and others during training. She thought about every person who'd ever looked at her and seen someone who didn't belong. She'd proven them wrong, not just for herself, but for every woman who would come after her, who would face the same doubts and the same challenges. She'd set a standard, demonstrated what was possible, shown that competence and courage didn't depend on gender or size or any of the superficial factors people used to make judgments. She'd done what leaders were supposed to do. She'd made the impossible look achievable, and in doing so, she'd opened doors for others to follow. Outside her window, Fort Campbell was settling into evening routine. Soldiers heading to the dining facility, NCOs finishing paperwork, the constant activity of a division that never truly slept. Somewhere in the company area, her platoon was probably gathered in someone's room, telling stories and building the bonds that would carry them through whatever came next. Maya Chen, 2nd Lieutenant, United States Army, holder of the Soldier's Medal, honor graduate, and leader of 2nd Platoon, smiled quietly to herself. She'd made it. Against every doubt, every obstacle, every moment when the easier choice would have been to give up, she'd made it. And this was just the beginning.